All right, welcome back, everybody. My name's Ryan. I'm the marriage pastor at Redemption Tempe. We get an opportunity usually after every marriage night to do, or we're trying to after every marriage night, do a podcast that kind of revisits the topic that we covered in the previous marriage night that we had. So I want to just give a quick framework for today of what we're doing. We started in February this year with the Massies. We did a marriage night that kicked us off on a talk about foundation and expectations. And so our desire today is kind of build on that and maybe get just a little more practical. So we have Eric and Amy Ludwig with us here today. They did a talk this time around on desires, decisions, and dough, which is kind of a cool title. Our original title was Finances, Decision-Making, and Goal Setting, which is kind of a boring title. So they made it a little bit better. So our hope today is that you would, after this podcast, maybe walk away with more of an ability to maybe discern your desires, connect those desires to your decision-making process, and then live within the boundaries of your financial framework, which any one of these topics, we could probably spend the whole time on one of them, but our goal is probably to highlight these three. So, Eric and Amy, why don't you guys introduce yourself and share whatever you want to, and then we'll kind of get going on our conversation.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, Eric and Amy Ludwig, we've been married over 30 years now. We have 2 adult children, been coming to Redemption. This summer will be 9 years, and we've thoroughly enjoyed our time at the marriage nights over the years, and just love being part of Redemption, and thankful to be able to be here today. I had a career in corporate America for a couple decades, but for the last number of years been working as a life coach with a faith-based nonprofit, and enjoy that type of work. So and Amy.
Yeah, and when we came out here to Arizona, I was working in that same nonprofit with Eric, but for the past 3 years, I've been teaching adult literacy at Perryville Prison.
Awesome. Wow. Move all the way across the country and change everything, right? That's that's how it happens sometimes.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, glad to have you guys at Redemption Tempe, and just for Janet and I, you guys have been good friends, and I can't believe it's been 9 years already. I was just reflecting back the other day that I think I sat down with you guys to do like a membership interview, didn't I? It was at the coffee
Gold
shop.
Bar.
Gold Bar Coffee. Wow. How about that?
Yeah. Thanks for letting us come in, man, and giving us the green light, man.
No, that was an easy one. That was it's pretty amazing that much time has passed. I know you guys have been a part of the marriage nights for a really long time, and part of our marriage team, and obviously, Eric, you're an elder here, so genuinely thankful for you guys in the years you've been here. Just a quick reminder, I don't think I said this at the beginning, but the marriage nights, the whole goal of those originally was just to put couples that have been married for quite some time in front of other couples to say, hey, these are the things that we think are really important in marriage that we would want to pass on to other people. And I think it's grown legs in a lot of ways that we've been able to, address many different topics in marriage, and even sometimes some of the same topics from different perspectives at different stages. So that's been a lot of fun over the years. I think we've been doing marriage nights for probably 10 years now, maybe longer. I don't even know. But all right, well, let's get into it today. The format is just I'm going to ask some questions, and hopefully I'll have some good discussion. So I'm going to start with the first one. There's a Psalm 37 says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. So my first question is, how would we discern if God is the one putting a desire in our heart versus maybe just ourselves or someone else, or maybe even like the enemy, doing that? Like, how would you guys say you can discern if God is putting a desire in your heart?
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's not always an easy question, but first thing is to see if it lines up with Scripture. Does Scripture speak on this topic? Is it clear that Scripture permits this or speaks against it. And so that's the first place to go. But of course, not everything falls under that. Like, don't talk about riding a roller coaster in Scripture. But so but could that be good? Could that not be? So we want to look Scripture to see if that's from the Lord. The other thing we want to look at is oftentimes we can get a thought or desire in there that is from the enemy. And so we would ask, does it line up with the lies of the enemy? And I would suggest that Satan basically has two lies that he says over and over again to people. One is, you're not good enough. And the other is, God can't be trusted. And so does the decision line up with one of those lies? Then it's probably not the right decision to make. And kind of the third thing would be, I'd look at the great commandment. We were told to love God, love others, love ourselves. And so can you make this decision in light of one of those objects of love? So those would be some kind of more practical tips around discerning desires.
Yeah. Amy, anything to add?
No, I definitely agree with those. And I know we'll get more into how to finesse it.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is definitely on our mind more, even with our kids, who our two kids are recently engaged. So I'm even as we're talking about this today, I'm also thinking about them as they start their lives as a couple.
I know Jan and I were just talking today too, because, our daughter's getting married in 2 weeks from yesterday, and you guys have two kids engaged. You do start to think of these things like not just what's going on in our lives, but now they're going to do all these things.
Right.
Like, is that are we double worried now? How do you pass this on? And, as a parent, you're always thinking, shoot, I hope I did this well. Can you guys give us maybe I know this helps me a lot, maybe tell a story or two of how you've been able to identify your desires or even your desires as a couple, and maybe what that process to discern that looks like.
Yeah. So about 8 years ago, Eric and we were going on a road trip, and he was telling me about a recording he had listened to where the speaker asked the audience if they knew what their spouse's dream was. And so he turned to me and he asked what mine was. And I immediately said, I want to teach an adult to read, specifically a woman who is incarcerated. And he was surprised, one, because I answered so quickly.
Yeah.
And also that he didn't quite realize that that was something I still wanted to do. So we were in college together, and he knew that I taught in a prison while we were students. So that really kind of got the ball rolling in the sense that I also realized, hey, that is something I still really want to do. And then even when a desire stays on your heart.
Yeah.
And because some will come and go, and there are seasons for things, and that's fine. But when something lingers, to pay attention to that.
Totally.
But then, and this is something we were able to do that night, just asking that question of, do you know your partner's dream for his or her life?
Yeah.
Yeah, and even, I don't have another story, but just to tie back the last answer to that story, that to us seemed clear to be a desire put on our heart by God. I mean, it was part of Jesus' mission on earth was to set the captives free.
Yeah.
And Amy's teaching captives in a way that helps them to have greater freedom when they're on the outside. And I would say that the Great Commandment supports that because of the way she's loving others in that role. So just to tie those two together. Yeah.
It does kind of show how much freedom there is in our desires. You know, that you talked about consulting the Scripture. Does it fit with the Scripture? Well, I mean, we could say probably over 50% of our desires, you can't find a chapter and verse for that. And so understanding that desire is going to be particular to our context, to what we've gone through interpersonally in life, that's those kind of conversations. We're going to get to this later, but sometimes you just have to say well, I follow Christ. I think this desire fits in line with how Christ is. I'm gonna try this, or at least entertain it, So, something that you guys, I think you did this in the marriage night. If I wasn't there, but I know we talked about this. If you listen to this podcast right now, we're going to probably have you pause after this question because we think this is a really good exercise. But if you could grab an index card or anything, if you're listening to this, grab an index card, grab a piece of paper, whatever, anything to write on, and on one side of it, write down a current desire that you have. It can be short or long term. Then on the other side, write down the desire you think your spouse has. Anything to add to this? I know you guys did this and anything you want to add there? Okay. So do this, write down on one side a desire you currently have, and then on the other side a desire you think your spouse has. And then when you're done, share this with each other. So I'm going to, if you're...
And even a fun thing to do is to have the other person guess.
Okay.
Guess what they think your desire is.
We're doing
and
a
then
total
you guess
honeymoon
them.
game here.
like the newlywed game. And then you try and guess theirs and see how close you are. And it's okay if you didn't know it, because you will get to know them better through this.
Absolutely. All right. So if you're doing that, pause right now. All right. If you paused, we're back. If you didn't pause, we're just going to keep going here. So let me ask this. We're talking about desires. Is there any other tips or anything that you would say, hey, these are really important tips on this particular topic that we want to share?
Yeah, just two come to mind as we talk about desires, or in the original kind of title of this theme about goal setting. Like once a desire is identified, it could be pretty large, and it can be helpful to break that down into smaller steps and celebrate wins along the way towards the larger goal or towards that larger desire. So you don't have to be intimidated. You can break it down into smaller steps. And then the second thing that we found helpful is, spouses can be a great source of accountability, but that can also add to some friction. So we would like to ask each other at times, how would you like me to help hold you accountable? Rather than let me do what I think would be best or Amy thinks is best. So there's just a couple more thoughts as we wrap up the first section here.
Yeah. I think it's good to remember too, I think about this, like if you're sharing your interpersonal desires with another human being, that's a pretty vulnerable place to be. And I think we all think this, like your spouse should be the most vulnerable person in your life, but it's still a pretty real thing to share, like, hey, this is a desire that I have. If that doesn't happen, what if I don't follow through on it? What if I'm afraid? What if this doesn't work? There's all these things going on inside of us. Before you say, like, if you say, hey, I'm going to teach adult to read, like, oh my gosh, am I going to actually have to do that? Because we used to say all the time, the only thing scarier than not being able to live your dream is living your dream, because there's so much responsibility that goes alongside that. So it's good to remember that when we're talking about desires, this is a very vulnerable place to be.
Yeah.
So
thanks, Ryan.
All right, we'll move in. We'll take it on to the next section, which is decision making. What was it again? Desires, decisions, and dough, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on decisions now. So let me just start with this. How does or did decision making change when you guys got married?
Yeah. So once you're married, it's not just you anymore. Your decisions, the decisions that you make don't just affect you. It affects another person. And then, if children are in the mix, it affects them too. So you always have to be thinking of the other and how is this decision or this dream going to impact them? So even, I can say this too, even that dream of mine, that was 30 years ago that I first had the dream, because I was in college and I'm like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so in a way, what I'm living out now was 30 years in the making, but it was also, I feel like, right on time. because I actually don't think it would have gone as well when our children were young, because it is a long day and takes a lot of time and energy. So there were other things I was able to do back then in smaller ways, like volunteer a little bit or be a pen pal. So you just have to think about, it doesn't have to be fully lived out in that moment. It doesn't mean it won't happen.
Yeah.
So
That's a good
this
point.
might look differently along the way.
And I mean, on your side too, like I remember you guys moved out here, you're working together, doing the same thing. And then this, fulfillment, or at least the beginning of the fulfillment of a long-term dream happens, which means you changed, what you're doing. How did that affect you guys?
Well, we changed the question. So a decade ago, when we realized we would be empty nesters with some level of freedom, we were asking the question to the Lord, what can we do? Like, what do you have for us? And we really landed on a beautiful role with a nonprofit, came out here, and it was great, and it still is, for me. But it was a few years ago when the kids were out and there was even greater freedom that Amy asked the question, okay, now what can I do? And I think that was probably wouldn't have been the best question 10 years ago, but 3 or 4 years ago, that was the right question. So,
Wow.
yeah. And then to your original question about like what changes when you're married, even just the little things like, okay, Amy grew up with Jif peanut butter and I had Skippy, or which way does the toilet paper roll go? Or like different little things that like,
From
come
the
up.
top down, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there's all these little decisions. And so one just simple practical thing that was helpful for us was asking the question, who cares more? Like, if Amy really like cared about that brand of peanut butter and I could, whatever, it's peanut butter,
Yeah.
or we end up with 2 jars of peanut butter and live happily ever after. But kind of ask that question, who cares more? Oh, that's really like, even just planning our wedding. We didn't tell this story, but like, she sent me on a mission to get like stamps for our wedding invitations.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, I can get a roll of flags for whatever, She's like, you cannot get flags. I'm like, the invitation's going to get there the same way. Yeah. Do not get flags. You need to get flowers. I'm like, clearly, Amy
Pretty
cares
stamps
more
matter.
about the pretty stamps on our wedding invitations. I don't. She wins. I get flower stamps. That's easy. So stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, again, if you're listening and you've been married for 5 years or less, what Eric just said is gold. Because we care so much about, when we're younger, we'll just die on 1,000 hills. Like there's 1,000 right ways to, and after a while you just go like, hey, and we're going to talk about this kind of into the next question or so. Like there is a process for making decisions as a married couple on things that like are really going to matter. But most things in a day, you just kind of go, hey, is this more important to you? Because like, I don't care if we eat Frosted Flakes or Cheerios, like just whatever's important to you, let's do it, That is really golden when you're in an intimate relationship. So, yeah. So, again, not to be redundant, but like, could you guys just share with us, like maybe some framework for your decision-making, maybe some good tips, and then possibly like some things not to do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one scripture we did share was from Amos 3:3. Can two walk together unless they are agreed? So having that unity in decision making is vital, or you're gonna like literally trip each other up.
Totally.
And again, this is especially when we're getting into those big decisions.
Yeah.
So like 10 years ago, when we were making this decision about what this next half of our life would look like, we were not on the same page at first regarding timing. Like I was good with like, yes, let's leave our jobs, join this nonprofit, even make a move from the East Coast, from Pennsylvania to Arizona. But timing wise, I thought I think I would be ready for that in 5 years. And Eric was ready right then to get started.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I guess he had some good, shepherding. So he was willing to wait. In some ways, I mean, we were still exploring things. I think it was probably really hard on him. And
to your credit,
Yeah.
you were willing to go. So both of us
Yeah,
were
that's true.
willing to support the other, even though we weren't on the same page.
And then just fortunately, some things happened where in my job, I was working at our church at the time, that I was able to do something more with member care, and that was helpful. I'm like, I kind of got to have like a vision of what it could be.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, I just kind of like flipped a switch.
Yeah.
And then I was ready to go, which was good because honestly, if we had waited 5 years, I would have been ready to move in 2020, which probably would not have gone well.
Right.
So I was
Jeez,
glad
yeah.
we did
Yeah.
what we did. But also just that,
Yeah.
flexing on each other's timing.
So allow some room for flexing. The Lord was, in that particular large decision, the Lord was very gracious to allow us to get on the same page with timing. And that might not always happen for couples, so we don't want to like promise that here on this podcast. But for something that big, the Lord's like, I got you. I'll get you guys on the same page, and it was a beautiful, beautiful move.
But it's a wonderful way to serve each other.
Yeah.
Or even explore it.
Yeah.
What are some of your concerns?
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes you might always have the one who is ready before the other. But again, it's that talking it out.
Talking it out. Communication. That's
Yeah.
another thing you're like, what's part of our framework? Just, I don't know how many marriage nights I've been on a panel or spoken at, but I've probably said the word communication 100 times.
Yeah.
And people listen to this like, there goes Eric again.
Yes.
But it's true. I mean, communicate, and that's really a critical step to, and that's scriptural too, right? Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry.
Because it's that listening part,
Yeah.
because sometimes
Yeah.
we can think communication means, what am I going to say?
Right.
But a huge part of communication is really listening, really
Yeah.
listening, not only to the words being spoken, but what's underneath that.
Right.
Is there fear there?
Totally.
What are the anxiousness about that? Versus just resistance.
And communication with the Lord, right? Like James 1, if any one of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all freely and without reproach. And so, again, it's communication. But then you mentioned, what are some things not to do, or what are some so we will hit up that part of your question.
Well, let me just interject there,
Yeah.
just so I have it, because sometimes I'll get a little bit linear in my thinking.
Yeah.
We're starting off with like defining that when we're talking about decision making, we're talking about bigger decisions. We're going to change our lifestyle. We're going to buy a house. We're going to, let's have another kid.
Yeah.
Let's decide to change jobs or careers. This is the kind of, would you put anything else in categories where you're like saying decision making, or would we add more categories to that?
Oh, I would. I wouldn't list them here on this podcast, but I would, again, I'd communicate and say, hey, at what level, like, is this decision we're trying to make kind of merit the type of work we need to do to put into making a good decision? Or
Gotcha.
just like, which beach do we go to for vacation? I don't know.
Right, but I guess it kind of goes also back to that, kind of lighthearted thing about the peanut butter.
Yeah.
Because sometimes small things can turn into big fights.
True.
So then you also have to look under that as well. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? What is this,
True.
butting of heads?
Yeah.
So, in reversing back on that, you guys mentioned like number one thing is to be unified with each other. So the goal is to find a place of unity or agreement, or But then there's, hey, we may find something that we agree on, but really it becomes, now are we at the right timing for this? So there's really three factors going on. Number one, our goal is to unity above the thing that we want or whatever. And then number two, it's, do we agree on this?
Yeah.
And then do we agree on it as far as that is at the same time? That's that. I think those are, especially the last one's pretty valuable to point out. I haven't really thought that through as much. Like, you could literally agree on something and go, we're still not doing it because I think it should be in 5 years. You think today, and you can't pull the trigger on it because unity is so important to us that if somebody gets ahead of it, that's maybe one of the frustrating things about making a decision in marriage is one of you might know, I've been in this both ways with me and Janet, like, this is what we should be doing. This is the right thing to do. I think we should do it now. And you're like, we're not doing this until we're together on this. And you have to wait for a period of time.
Yeah.
Is it worth waiting? Do you drive that ship? Like, I'll tell a story in a minute, probably about when we've gotten ahead of ourselves and it just doesn't work super well. But yeah. Now back to that helped me frame back to what not to do.
Yeah, what not to do.
Yeah.
Just a couple little stories came to mind. We when we were first married, we had an actual wall calendar in the kitchen, like pre-Google Calendar, which Warren just gave a great message on that, by the way. But paper on the wall, and if the box was empty, whoever put the thing on the calendar first, that's what we got to do. That was kind of our rule.
Oh wow!
Like, I want to go out with this friend.
Like kids too, or
no,
this was pre-kids.
Pre-kids.
Okay.
So I, coming out of college, still maintain a lot of relationships. I'm planning stuff all the time. Oh, good, empty spot on the calendar. I'm putting stuff on the calendar. Yeah. We communicated. We were unified. That was our rule, So but then Amy, you're like.
Well, I'm just more introverted.
Yeah.
So, man, when I would look at that calendar and see every weekend booked. So I finally took a Sharpie and just started Xing out Saturdays. I'm like, I need off this day and that day. Like, you can plan something for yourself, but I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So I guess what not to do is assume that the framework you put in place day one is never gonna be changed, right? So we had to re-talk about that, things like that. Yeah. The other thing that comes to mind is dependent on how you process, whether people are, external or internal processors. There have been times where we're thinking about, maybe I'll go out to dinner tonight, and right away Amy's in out to dinner mode. If I say that out loud, but then I open the fridge, I'm like, oh no, we still got these good leftovers. We can stay home.
Yeah.
And then she's like, upset with me the rest of the night. Like, so you got to learn, like, what are we processing out loud? What do we or people like, somebody comes home from work and like, I got a job offer to like move to India, and that's just him processing. Yeah. Whereas the wife's already like, how the heck's that going to work? Or it could be wife, husband. I don't mean to just say husband. But because
Eric was the one who said that about moving to India. I'm already going, okay, how's this? How are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And like, he's more extroverted. And so, and there is space to process things out loud. He's just learned to say, hey, I just need to process this with you. I'm not saying it's actually going to happen. And then so we'll have that dialogue. Or he'll phone a friend and process that with a friend. And then once it's all processed, then, okay, Amy, we have some things to
And you're like, you might need to process with your journal for an hour or something, and then talk to me about it. So again, communicate with each other, maybe not everything all the time together. Figure out how you need to communicate and process and then talk. So we just wanted to but we're curious to hear your story you alluded to.
Well, I mean, in the realm of like, we kind of created our own little framework. Actually, it was more given to us of how we make decisions, and our number one thing was to talk about it, and sometimes you think like talking and communication can be two different things. But I'll give for instance, I think sometimes we even a lot of us can skirt over the talking about it because we could assume things about each other. Well, I thought you'd be on the same page as me or whatever. But I got offered, I had breakfast with a friend. He said, hey, I'm going to go start a church. I want you to come with us. Boom. I'm going. I've already made the choice, everything, and we're just sitting at breakfast. Well, I have a wife and a 7-month-old baby, I think it was. I think Abby was, she was 3 months old
Oh
at
my
the time.
gosh.
And I said, yeah, I'm in. And I didn't even ask where we were going, just was like, yeah, let's do it, you know? And I got home and I said, you know, I won't say my friend's name, but I said my friend's name is going to go start a church and I'm going with him. And it was just kind of like okay, you know, and I just kind of walked out of the room and thought I'll let her process that. And I think she said to me, can I come too? You know, can me and Abby come too? You know, something along those lines. But it took about a month of going back and forth on that. And so we ended up in a lot of conversations during that time. But I would say, you know, we've had it the other way around where I had a lot of opinions on what should happen with the kids in school. And a lot of times Janet wasn't very open to those conversations. So it was just, you know, we had to learn how to talk those things out. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we generally we would say our goal in decision making is go talk about it. Mm-hmm. So we just talk. Mm-hmm. You know, we learn this. Then we search the scripture and pray, you know, like Eric talked about this earlier. And what's hard about that is searching the scripture and praying can feel ethereal. Like I'm looking for some, you know, answer in the sky or somebody to knock me on the head or a vision or whatever. Mm-hmm. But when you do that, you tend to find themes. And I think I didn't really think about this until the last maybe 10 years that we are part of God's story for the whole world. And so we play a role in that. So part of that is going to be the newness of what God is doing in our lives, but it's always going to line up with his story from the scripture. Yeah. So learning how to do that has been, I would say, an art form. Yeah. And then, you know, we would say we go, you know, Proverbs talks about seeking, you know, the wise man seeks godly counsel. So, we made it a goal to talk to the people that we trust as much as possible. And our goal was always to wait until we could agree on the decision. So the more information that we got and the more counsel we got, the picture gets clearer for us. And then make a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, my dad told me all growing up, he said this a lot to me. If you don't know what to do, make a decision, and then you'll know what to do. And it is true. We don't really know how we feel about something until you make a decision and do it. Then you experience it and you go. And the good part about God is, and you know, what we're actually going to get into this, the next marriage night is going to focus more on kind of facing the hard seasons in marriage. And I think part of facing the hard season in marriage is we had a plan. We made our choices. We were going this direction. You know, what happened?
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, Mike Tyson said, you know, what's his quote?
Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody's got a plan until you get I mean, that is no truer statement has been said. Like, so I think to some degree, you're not boxed in just because you made a decision together. God is in that process, and you could go down the road for a while in that and go, you know what, we learned this and we're going to pivot, or man, that was exactly right, or we did that for 5 years and now I feel like it's time to maybe, like you even said, we reframed the question. You know, we just asked a different question than we did the last time, and things change. You know, so again, we'll let, you know, Brian and Sharon get into that a little bit more of like when you look at life and it doesn't go the way you planned, or I set these goals, or I was honest about my desires, we made a good decision. Like, well, you know, sometimes it just doesn't go the way you thought.
And it doesn't mean it was wrong.
Right.
Because there's just some things that happen that are out of your control. And then you can also reassess. I think there's some people who have that analysis paralysis.
Yes.
And that's when they're not making the decision and just doing it because of that fear maybe of it not going well.
Yes.
But it's like, this doesn't have to be forever, but let's just walk in this decision.
Yes. I think that's probably what you just said there, Amy. To me, that's probably the most valid thing, that most of the time we're not dealing in the right and wrong. It's a
Right,
wisdom
correct.
thing. It's
Yeah.
a process thing. It's a relationship
Right.
thing. It's not, oh my gosh, we made the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it didn't feel like that, but that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means that's part of the process of you discovering the next thing or really revealing what God was doing in your life or something along those lines, which I'll be honest is pretty painful.
Yeah.
Sometimes that process is like, it feels wrong or it feels right, you know, like, and I don't know if it necessarily fits in that category. It's just part of our relationship with God. So, all right, let's move into maybe our last one, finances, dough. Just gonna, and I think you guys probably ask these questions too, but just want to ask them to you. What are some things that come easily to you regarding money in marriage? We'll start there.
Yeah, and before we answer that question, and we mentioned this at marriage night, but we want to recognize that Amy and I are coming out of a place of like relative privilege.
Yeah.
So both sets of our parents paid for our college. We were able to start life as a married couple, debt-free, and
Nice.
we were able to buy a house, you know, and looking at today's market and looking at
Yeah,
what
it's
student
a lot
loans
harder
are
now.
today, I realized so people listen to podcasts, you know, we're not just here to sitting on a cloud saying, do these 4 things,
Yeah.
because we understand that like times are different. So just wanted to put that out there. But things that have come easily to us, in part because of the foundation the Lord blessed us with, is saving and budgeting. And we are both pretty debt averse, so not spending money that we don't have.
Yeah.
We've both enjoyed tithing and giving. So there is a lot around finances that the Lord has made joyful for us, and we've been able to, experience together. And that doesn't, you know, I think I told a similar story, I think at marriage night, that like, I can't tell you how many times in the first 20 years of marriage that I took peanut butter and jelly to lunch for work, and a bag of pretzels and a bag of grapes and a store brand Diet Cola, and that was lunch, you know?
Yeah.
But then we'd take a great family vacation to some all-inclusive resort and bust it out and have a great time. So we would save in the day-to-day, kind of splurge on the different occasions, and loved those kind of rhythms as a family. So God's been really gracious to us in that space to respond to his love there. So
Yeah. And I know that financial issues can be one of the top challenges in marriages. So we're fortunate that hasn't been our challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other things that can be hard,
Sure.
but we're just, I guess, on the same wavelength for a lot of things. I mean, I think Eric overall is a better saver. You know, I share this, that like he would get a bonus from work, and he's always had good jobs. Like,
Yeah.
but even in the lean years, like it would even be, you know, we would do fun things. But whenever he would get that, my first thought was, well, one, it was really fun to figure out who we were going to give like extra money to. We both enjoyed that. But then again, my first thought was, where are we going out to dinner? And his next thought after, who are we giving to? Were just our different savings accounts, which on the one hand I thought was really boring, but I'm very grateful that was his. I'm like, oh yeah, I almost like would forget, like, oh yeah, that is a wise thing to do. Okay, all right, let's do that first, and then we'll see what's left.
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. Well, I mean, you mentioned, you know, I eat peanut butter and jelly for every day, but then we
should get
go
sponsored.
on a great trip. You know, I think that, I mean, that's a valid way of putting it, because we've used the phrase preferences versus priorities, you know, type of a thing. And so will you limit your preferences for the sake of your priority? Let me ask you this question. Like, do you guys have a way that you structure your finances as a married couple? Like, how has that changed over the years? I mean, Amy, you're talking about in the leaner years, but then there's been other years we always found a way to celebrate. Like, how has that evolved for you guys, and what is that structure for you?
It's interesting because I think it's almost, in looking back, that we can see the leaner years. Because I think overall our principle has been live, beneath, what was it like? We don't spend.
Don't spend money. So
Yeah, don't spend money you don't have.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
Wow.
So the
Novel.
I know,
That is very
I know.
not American.
If
Amy.
you shout out to our kids who may or may not listen to this, but if you ask them if they were on a podcast and they say, what are the two things your folks taught you about money? They would say, give back
Okay.
and don't spend money you don't have. And we're recording this podcast on a day that John Crawford talked about in a sermon on greed, and he said the cure to greed is generosity. And I'm just phrasing that a different way, like the way to defeat the money god is to give back and to let it go. And so give back, and in general, don't spend money you don't have. And I get credit card, pay it monthly, mortgage. I get there's ways for that, and we're not here to give. We're not certified financial people. We're not here to give advice in that realm. But in general, those are two helpful principles. And then the third practical thing we've done is we maintain a monthly budget and write down what we spend and keep track of that. And we mentioned for folks that don't do that and want to get started in that, just take a month and write down everything you spend, and then take a look at it and create a budget out of that baseline. So there's a few kind of answers to the framework question.
Yeah.
Would you say, has anything like throughout your marriage, has there been any evolution to that? Like, has it changed the way you think about it, the way you do it? Or have you, would you say we've stuck to that the whole 30 years of marriage? We've pretty much stayed on a line.
Well, so this again, Eric helped us to come into marriage on good footing. So we were engaged our senior year in college. We were engaged for like a year and then got married. And on our honeymoon, he actually had like a paper budget.
Really?
And we kind of talked through it. And then we have had one every month. He prints out a new one. So we do have it. It is old school.
I've seen it.
So we have like a
There's
stack of
probably
them.
100 apps for that now. but
So
we're
in
still
terms
old school.
of that has been consistent. Now the amounts in the different sections have changed. As we were first figuring out, okay, can we live on just one salary so that we have margin?
Gotcha.
So we did that from the beginning just to have
And
some
again,
space.
we recognize that
Yeah.
may be harder in
Right,
today's environment
right.
for some
And,
folks. But yeah.
people then get slammed with medical bills. There's some things out of our control.
Totally.
But kind of just starting off that way was really helpful, and we've continued that.
We did one thing we did change a little bit. We've always, and we believe strongly that that a husband and wife should share a bank account, and so there should be transparency there. There may be outlying cases where that doesn't make sense, and we want to leave some room for that. But again, in general, that creates trust and transparency and removes some room for secrecy and things like that. So we think that should be part of the framework.
Because it's unifying.
Yeah, one of the things
we're paying for this together.
Right,
Yeah.
together. But one of the things we changed fairly early on in marriage or added was there were some things that Amy felt a little guilty for spending some money. And so we kind of carved out a section in the budget called the Amy Fund.
Yeah.
Where
that was my.
and there's a section in the budget called the Eric Fund, and so that's still written down and there's still some accountability. But if she wants to purchase something that I think's ridiculous, or I want to purchase something that she thinks ridiculous, well, you got an Amy Fund, I got an Eric Fund, we got a joint account, but
but
that worked for us.
I still have that amount. And
Yeah.
that was something I needed early on.
Yeah.
Another a
and was that from the beginning, or did that
It
develop?
was
the first couple
it was
couple
like
years.
Okay.
no. It was like
After-
it was like 2 months in.
Okay.
Because I think I said something one day, I think I want to get my nails done, but I just feel weird taking that out of the budget. That's not really a need. And he's like, you're allowed to do that. Or I'm going to go, no, I feel kind of, I don't know, maybe because in the beginning he was making more money than I was. So I guess I was still in that mindset of well, what am I contributing? So Eric had to say,
A ton, honey.
right.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, this is us together. It's not yours and mine, it's ours. And then I think he just said, "Do you want like a section of the budget that says Amy?" I'm like, yes, I do. And it used to be just like $50 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it helped me to just be like, I can just, do some, just some fun spending, and I don't have to like feel like I need to run it by him or anything. I can just do it. So funny enough, that has stayed in the budget, although the number's gotten a lot bigger, which is nice. But that has helped. Yeah.
Cool.
And then
a
practical thing.
Yeah.
One time when Eric was working for the bank, they had a company newsletter, and Valentine's Day one year, they said, you should write your spouse a love letter. And the love letter should be just a list of all your finances, all the account numbers, all the passwords, all that mundane but really practical needed stuff. And so Eric did that. And then he would update it each Valentine's.
It sounds funny. All the account, like we have accounts in like Switzerland. Or
Oh,
something.
no, not all the bank
Here's how you pay the utility bill.
Yeah,
and
it was like the
it's all
utility,
practical
the like TV, the power, electric, that kind of thing.
Right.
Because
Those
then
accounts.
there were times where he was out of town and all the power went out. I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, who do I call? And I would just go to that letter, and then I would look at it. I'm like, all right, here's our account number. Here's the phone number I call. It was just like a practical but also very loving thing.
Yeah,
to
no
do.
kidding.
And we don't always think of it to do that.
Yeah.
But it's super helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, let alone having a spouse pass away and you needing all that information.
Yeah.
But, kind of having it along the way.
Yeah.
There's so many like account number and passwords.
Yeah, and it's not like an everyday, maybe a couple times a year.
Yeah.
I'll update that, reprint it, stick it in a closet, and then, so.
But one other thing I wanted to say was, whether you consider yourself a saver or a spender, our society will pat the person on the back who's the saver. But that can be rooted in fear. Just like the spending could be rooted in fear, not necessarily frivolousness, but like fear.
Yeah.
So the saver might think, I can't trust that that I'm going to be okay in the future unless I hold on to this treasure, and be afraid to spend. And then that could bring up a lot of, contention.
Yeah.
But then the spender, maybe they grew up with scarcity or had some things happen and they have this scarcity mindset of, I know the money won't be around at the end of the month. So I'm going to spend it on something I can physically hold because that will still be there. And then that can lead into buying things you don't necessarily need, but just this fear that the money's just going to be gone. So just even taking the time to ask that about yourself, or even to better understand your partner of what might be driving more of, I would say, the extremes. But fear can be underneath either.
Yeah, so true. It is. I'm reminded they did. Would it be a social experiment in an orphanage? I'm pretty sure I read the study. It was in. I'm pretty sure it was in Western Europe, but they were noticing that in this particular orphanage that the kids were not sleeping at night. So they decided to give them a loaf of bread when they went to bed. And they started sleeping more because they were not afraid of where their next meal would come from. So they, it's interesting that you can get comfort. I mean, that's on an extreme level, but you can get this comfort from I have this little piece. I don't have to worry, versus the person who's, I'm never getting anything. I better spend it right now type of a thing. There's a vacillation between those two ways. And you're right. They both can be driven by fear and by faith. Honestly, you can spend in faith and you can spend with confidence, and then you can save in faith and save with confidence and vice versa. So
But I love that with those children that they worked with them. They didn't just say, no, you need to trust us that there's going to be food tomorrow, because there always has been. It's like, you know what? This is a struggle.
Yeah.
Here's your loaf of bread to
Promise
sleep
you
with.
we're going to give it to you. Yeah.
Because you need that right now.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just to review, I appreciate that because I just knowing you guys, I know, especially talking to Eric, I know how I've seen the paper sheet, and it was like, wow, this is awesome, how you do that. But I think there are idiosyncrasies that every couple has to work out. Do we need an Amy and an Eric fund? Do we need to talk like this? Do we need to make these decisions and all that? But I do think there are some, I think your basic principles are stuff that everybody could, everybody has some opportunity in their context to give back. So if we're thinking that we get something, God blesses us, or even we earn something, to give that back is there's nothing more rewarding than that. Then, don't spend more than you make. I understand that can be hard at times, both out of desire and necessity.
Sure.
Yeah.
But in general, you could say if you don't spend more than you make, you're probably going to be pretty safe. And if you start with things like, let's say I make this amount of money and I give and I save this amount of money before I touch anything else, it changes your perspective on your money, that it's not really mine ultimately. It belongs to God, to my spouse, to, if we have children, to our children. It reminds you of I know where I'm getting this from and I know who I'm keeping it for purposes and whatnot. And then a budget, it's not super hard to write down what you make and what you spend in all the categories you spend it in. So I mean, just starting with those most basic things are probably gonna, if you actually do them, if you talk about them, it can sound daunting, but if you actually do them, it's so freeing to live that way. Anything else you guys would add on the finance side?
Just do that with what are your goals in mind? What are your short and long-term financial goals, and how can that help motivate you towards those steps you just outlined? So
Yeah.
It is interesting. If we're going to wrap this up here right now, but it's interesting the progression. If we start with what we really want, our desires, and you kind of get into that goal setting mindset, this is what we really want to be, then we make our decisions on that, then really your finances become a practical outcropping of all of those things. And so if you're not taking the time to be honest about your desires and making decisions together, it'll be very hard to structure your finances, because you're getting money and then you're just doing whatever you feel like,
Yeah.
So that progression is really, it's a great progression to go that way and know, okay, we know why we're doing things we're doing. Amy, go.
Yeah, because to Eric's credit, when I shared with him, especially just a couple years ago, when I said, hey, I really do want to make this shift, leave the nonprofit and teach women in prison. He goes, okay. He's like, okay, well, can you give us 6 months to kind of readjust our spending so that you're able to do that? And then I realized he thought I was going to do it solely on a volunteer basis. And I'm like, oh, no, I plan to get paid for this.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, okay. But just knowing that he was willing to say, okay, that's going to be a real shift in income.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what changes we can make for you to be able to live out that dream.
Yeah.
Was really beautiful.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
He was able to, even think that way.
Yeah.
And then just to know, okay, do we have things set up so that we are able to flex when things like that happen?
Yeah.
So it won't be so life-changing.
Well, it's good too, if for younger couples to know, if you set a framework for the first 25 years of your life that allows you the freedom to make those kind of decisions, then you can. But if you don't set that, it might be hard, like you said, or, I might have had a dream start 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and the fruition of it is now, and it's because you guys have structured your life in a way that made it where it's possible to say, we have worked these things out for so long that we can make a decision like that. Where, I think it's very valuable to know when you have things from God, like Abraham, hears God speak to him, and it's 10 years before Isaac is born, and then it's many years before he lives out. It's good to know, start prepping your life in a way that you might experience in this in 10 years, in 20 years, maybe some things in 30 years, where you go, man, I had no idea that all of this work that we did together as a couple would bring freedom to do these things that God has called us or allows us to do.
Yeah, because maybe even if a savings fund or an IRA sounds really boring, just call it like your dream fund.
There you go.
And then see what happens down the road.
And again,
Yeah,
people may not
totally.
be in a position where their dream is to still have money at the end of the month right now.
Totally.
Sure.
So we get that. So we get
Yeah.
where people are coming from different places, listening to this podcast, and so
Freedom
start
fund.
small and
Totally.
let's see what happens. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, it may just be, I was remembering reflecting when you guys said it may just be like we went through a really hard time in our marriage, and all I could think was every Friday we went to lunch at Costco, and that was our go out to eat. That's the only fun thing that we did that wasn't at our house. And I still remember for our whole family to eat would cost $7.05. And I would think to this day, Costco is still like going to Disneyland for us. I just ate at Costco this last weekend with my wife, and it was like we sat there, and I felt like this is like a pinnacle experience for me, because we have way more freedom in finances than we did then.
Sure.
But we still are so thankful that we could go out to Costco for lunch and eat, but it makes you realize you don't have to have, like you're saying, Eric, the highest goal you could have. That you may or may not reach that, but you could be really, really content with celebrating on a daily or a weekly basis that is on the smallest level possible, and let God multiply that to wherever he wants to multiply it to for you. And that's great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Cool.
anything wrapping up you guys would want to, any last comments, statements, or anything? So
Just want to say if people have any questions about anything we shared or want to get in touch with us, we're happy to talk to folks. So
Yeah.
thanks for the
Awesome.
opportunity.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really great to get to talk to you guys. We look forward to the next marriage night. We're getting together. I think it's May 18th, and the Stouts are going to be talking about facing hard seasons in marriage. So look forward to that. We love you guys, and we'll talk soon.
God bless. Thanks.
Thank you.